Yo, this is Sebastian, and we're going to check out Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile today. I've been wanting to look at this for a while. This plugin came out pretty recently, and yeah, I just want to take this for a spin. Essentially, my background is as a mobile developer, primarily on Android, but I do spend 20-30% building iOS apps. And so I wanted to take a look at this multi-platform solution and see, how it works. Just start with the basics with the hello world and just experience the process. I had some time spending with another multi-platform solution. I'll pull that up over here. And it was pretty interesting, but I will have to admit the iOS experience, I'm not a full-time iOS developer, but, it was still a bit of work. And so this is actually the MVI Kotlin platform, and Arcade develops this. And I thought it was really good, thought it was really well put together. They have a framework that's really easy to use. It's getting updated quite a bit. So if you want to check out something within, the Kotlin paradigm that also has a little bit of, architecture consistency, I think this is really cool. And so for, a really large app, like this is definitely something to check out in your architecture toolkit. I think the thing that I'm most interested in the Kotlin multi-platform plugin is just something even more basic. Like, I worked on this framework and with some of the test apps and sample apps, and yeah, it was, there's a lot of work already done, put in place. So I wanted to start with something that's even simpler, maybe more on the hello world level, and just see like, how does this work? How does this feel as a developer? So at the kotlinlang.org website, they have this setup page for setting up KMM, so Kotlin Multi-Platform Mobile, I think, page. And so you can Google this and you'll be led straight to this site. I spent some time before updating my Android Studio to the latest version. So I got to Android Studio 4.1. I have Xcode installed, so I've built some iOS apps before. And then I believe I updated to the latest Kotlin plugin, but we'll double check, we'll make sure. And I did install the Kotlin multi-platform mobile plugin. So if you just go to Preferences, Plugins, you should be able to find this guy and install it. And I do have the JDK installed. I mean, I was doing some React Native development, and then I used the Open JDK. Excuse me. Man, that was not a good move. Would not necessarily recommend that. But yeah, I mean, it makes everything a little bit more painful. I assume this will work. We'll take a look. So we'll go to the next step, create your first project. So I'll bring this down here. We'll do create new project. And they have this KMM application here. So we'll go here. I actually wanted to make a keyboard. I know, right? Not an actual application. I've never made a keyboard before. That's more longer term. But let's just call this keyboard for now. I wanted to make an emoji keyboard, actually. Minimum SDK. Yeah, we can do 23. Cool. And I don't think we need anything else there. And then for Android application, keep the default names for the application share files. Select the checkbox to generate sample tests for your project and click finish. So I assume we can rename this, but we'll just do this for now. So we got the emoji keyboard app. Project's gonna set up, it's gonna download everything. And then we can see the complete structure. Yeah, so that should load up in a minute. And then we'll run our application on Android. Should work. I believe it updated my emulator as well. Things are a little bit slower on my machine. We'll get it running. So that was a pretty easy setup experience. You know, I'm curious what code was actually generated there, right? So let me open that up. And we could just take a look at some of the files in here. So this is an emoji keyboard. We have our Android app and our iOS app. So looks like maybe two different modules. So this is the Android app up here. This is the iOS app, and then we have a top-level set of Gradle files and or a top-level Gradle project. Just for fun, let's keep some of this in version control. And let's check out, I'll pull up a GitHub Android git ignore. I always copy this in. I'm surprised they don't just use this one, but it's a little bit more extensive and it's usually a little bit more updated than what just Git has. So we'll throw all that in there. I'm sure we'll get some cool, fun stuff that's multi-platform specific. We'll add that in. New project. And oh, these are the worst. It's always that same stuff that you have to do for every single project. For git ignore. So that's OS. I assume there's a bunch of stuff in here. We might have to add like a Mac git ignore, but or iOS specific git ignore. What's the iOS one? I'm curious while our project updates. Or Xcode. Swift. Package manager dependencies. This looks good. Oh, iOS has code injection. Cool. Haven't seen that. Behind on the times. So we'll go down. Let's see. Doesn't look like it removed too much, but that's okay. Default project. I just like this just to see like what it adds, what it keeps track of. So in the iOS project, we have our Xcode project. We have our app. And I remember on the other project I was doing, like a deploy, or it would build a binary. And I remember building the binaries building actually just took a long time. And so that was probably my main gripe from a user experience perspective, irregardless of like binary and library size. I assume you get a couple megabytes, which is probably not ideal for multi-platform code just to share it, but not sure if there's a really good way around that. But like if I was developing a library, right, for other people to use, probably wouldn't select Kotlin multi-platform since it would just add this gigantic dependency for all the other folks. But if I'm building my own app, in this case, I am a little less concerned with that. So iOS app, I assume the Android app's pretty standard. Yeah, this looks pretty chill. And we'll take a look at like the build and the Gradle stuff, all that stuff. So we're still loading all of these files. Man. Well, that's getting done. Let's take a look if we can just take a look at some of these top level files. So this looks pretty standard for a build script. Let's see the settings.gradle. Looks pretty standard. So we have the shared folder. Cool. So this is like the shared module. So it's multi-platform. Awesome. And it will, looks like it will build some binaries called from shared. I assume that's how we'll get them imported into the iOS code. Common tests. Android shared dependencies. Okay. So I assume this is platform specific. And then maybe these are overridden. I'm not as familiar with by getting, or by getting, like, is this supplied by the iOS module? Don't know. So we got the target versions, minify enabled. We have some fun Xcode settings. So these look like Xcode environment variables. Sure, this will be fun to get to if you have a really large project. Wow, it's still loading. So it's downloading all of this stuff. Not sure what this is. Kate, Kotlin. Is it like frozen on something? Index pause, no. Commonizer embeddable. Okay, we'll give that a little bit more time. I'm not sure. Looks like, yeah, it looks like it's actually there. Hey, would you mind leaving that light on? Thanks. Cool. So it's still working. Okay, so we have some interesting things here. As a typical Android project, you usually don't see this, so this is fun. So what is by getting mean? I'm curious. Multi-platform. So multi-platform DSL should be marked by getting. Okay. Okay, so I guess that's specific to the Kotlin DSL. So in most projects I've worked in, we just still use Groovy, which I know is a pain. I know most folks are moving over to this, so looks like it just makes it lazy. I'm not familiar with this, how it defers it. Okay. Still downloading fun stuff. Okay. So we got that going. Any other fun files we should take a look at? So we got our settings. Great. Now let's take a look at our Android app. Because we don't have any other modules in the Android app. I assume if you were to have more modules, they'd be like higher level. I assume this is the app level module, typically what you see in a project. We're just defining it as Android app. And so we bring in the shared project. Makes sense from code. I like that. This looks good. And we have our main activity. So that is greeting. I guess this is from the shared code base. Yeah, from shared. And then we're setting that over here. Once it imports it, it should find, and that was the other thing too, like doing this before, using Xcode to look at Kotlin code was just terrible. And like and I remember the code that's produced for iOS, I'm not as familiar with this. It was like an Objective-C framework, and it just showed the interfaces. And like I didn't know Objective-C. I know Swift, okay, it's very similar to Kotlin, but yeah, the Objective-C equivalent was just really, hard for me to interpret some of the things. So that was another thing that was a little bit of a stumbling block. I just wasn't sure. Okay, well, how do I translate, this interface into Swift? Oh, it wants me to update Gradle plugin. We'll do that in a bit. All right, so it looks like it's close to being done. I guess it's just scanning everything. So in our iOS, our shared app, some fun stuff. So common main. So this is a class with the greeting function, and then it returns hello with something platform specific. And I assume this platform is just an interface, so it's expecting the other OS specific classes to implement this, right? I mean, maybe you can even think of this as like flavors for OSs. So we have an Android manifest there, which is kind of interesting. And I guess you kind of see this in the React Native universe too, right? Where you have, I see some parallels there just in terms of how things are structured. So this is the actual implementation of the platform. And then we give ourselves, okay. And then what does the iOS equivalent look like? Cool. So again, it's still in Kotlin, but it's for this guy. So I guess there's Kotlin specific OS code. I'm just curious where it's still indexing. This is really slow. Maybe it's just because it's recording on Zoom, but yeah, this is like kind of painful. It's been multiple minutes loading. Granted, I don't have the best computer, and sure, my internet's pretty good, but this is pretty slow. Okay, so they say it'll take some time for the first time. Cool. Give us some time to explore. But I'm curious how we're able to import this and what this is. So let's look at Kotlin documentation. So the platform libraries, they have docs on it. To provide access to users' native operating systems. Well, so we have some libraries for these platforms. I guess that would be nice to like be able to like see what it is. I don't think that's what I want. So like a search button. Cool. And so what do we use over here? UI kit. Okay. Maybe it's done by now. Cool. Finally finished. Wow. All right. So we should be able to deploy this to an emulator, which will really slow down our computer. And then we can also select iOS app. Oh, that's kind of cool. So yeah, the other thing that wasn't as much fun was like building the code, going into Xcode and yeah, and like run a command line to like build the binary and bring it into, it just wasn't fun. So maybe the developer experience is. So we'll get that running. We'll do that before we start iOS. So this is just a very basic hello world implementation just to see like, what does this look like? How does this work? Okay, let me take some notes on this. So I think my main one was just like, dude, it's freaking slow to set up a project. I like being able to launch iOS. So making some pros and some cons. So likes, dislikes. Really slow to yeah, I think it was pretty easy. I mean, I can imagine like before like this plugin, like just doing all that by hand and wiring that up for just a basic project It's kind of what you had to do, right? It's not fun. So it's pretty easy to set up. Yeah, really slow to download. It could be my computer. Obviously, see, it's super fast with this emulator. What else do we like? To be determined, like how easy it is to make changes in the shared module and access from Xcode. So I think that's something that's important for us. And fast it is. What else? I think that's the main one. And yeah, how easy it is to bring in only a library into an iOS keyboard. We'll figure that out. So we got that. Great. Let's try this. I could select which app. Not applicable for iOS configuration. What? I guess it just picks it for you. Easy launch of the project from Android Studio. That's pretty cool. I'm down with that. Yeah, being an early adopter of some of these technologies just isn't fun. So I'm usually pretty apprehensive for some of these things because sometimes they can just ruin developer productivity for all the appearance of gains and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it can get really bad if you're really early with the process. So I'd be cautious of doing anything like this for an application with the team, because then you have to like troubleshoot issues and you're kind of like the first person to do it, as opposed to having some other guinea pigs like with the rest of the ecosystem. So I'm typically not a early adopter for a lot of this stuff. I'm late to the party, and sometimes I skip. Sometimes I'm so late. I get to jump a generation of learn processes of what people hate, and so that does excuse me, it does work in my favor. Oh man, it's just so slow. So I guess it's downloading dependencies. Yeah, I mean that was my main gripe. I think it was easy, yeah. So let's jump around a little bit. So once we deploy it, looks like you can edit the configurations. We can run the tests. Won't do that for now. So we can open greeting. You will see the changes for both applications. Okay. See how fast that is. But boy, yeah, it's really struggling. It's like 20, 30 minutes just dealing with, and I had done prep, right? I downloaded 4.1 prior, installed the plugin. It's just kind of brutal. So we do that. And then what's this discover your KMM project? Yeah, so far easy documentation, right? Are the first time setup. Yeah, so discover. Mobile specific structure of Kotlin multiplatform. So I think we took a look at some of this, right? So we have our different modules. And if you're in iOS, you're probably not as familiar with the module. You can think of it as a way of dividing up your code. I'm just wondering, what's the Swift Xcode equivalent? Maybe think of it as like a different framework or library, like dividing your code up into different libraries almost. But yeah, you can have like your top level project, and you can have just like a gigantic app module, or you can divide it up, right, depending on what you need. So pretty typically, you'll see like, maybe you have an SDK module, right, or like a base module with a lot of the things that are shared across all of your application, and maybe you have an app or UI module that takes care of the app level framework, or the high level framework for what a user sees. So in our root project, this is what we saw for Android. Xcode uses its own build system, isn't connected with other parts that came over via Gradle. Instead, it uses the shared module as an external artifact framework. Okay. I'm really curious about this. This is my main thing. I guess it's down below. Includes Android and iOS framework. Common main, for anything that's not tests, right? Tests. So this creates a library. This looks pretty standard. You need this information for Android. So for iOS, yeah, this is what I'm really curious about. A framework kind of hierarchical directory with shared resources. Uses Kotlin native. I assume it spits it out in C or Objective-C. That exposes the framework to the Xcode project from which the iOS application is built. Yeah, maybe this is like the nice thing, because like I was like running these commands manually to like build it for iOS, and it sucked. Is it done? Nope. Still building. slow. Typical Android app. So they add the framework here. Okay. The latest version of the framework. To do this, use a run script phase that executes the pack for Xcode. Oh, okay. I like that. So like you don't always have to like generate each time. Like it's always weird. Like you're working in Android Studio, do you have to like build and compile it, then go to Xcode, or like does it automatically update it? The embed framework. So decide what to share. Business logic. Cool. This is always the cool discussion, right? Like how much of the architecture do you want there? Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on your team too. Like you're really tying the iOS team to like use whatever architecture that you're supplying with it. Maybe they don't want that. Like I mean, there's a lot of good patterns in iOS. Like maybe they'd even wrap something around that on the multi-module side. That just allows it to work a little bit better from a developer experience perspective. They even have the MVI process or pattern here. Okay. We have a view, a model. Cool. Declarative UI frameworks, right? So we're using Compose. So we'll make a KMM shared module. And this is the part, right? I think we already accomplished this, right? It like it makes the iOS app, makes the Android app. Like now we can just hack those to pieces and work with what we have. But if we had an existing one, yeah, you could do this. Okay, did it deploy? Wow, cool. So what I wanted to do was, yeah, go into over here into the iOS app. Let's open this project and let's make a change. Because yeah, you can't edit the. I guess they expose what's over here, right? So on the iOS app, we have the app delegate, the content view. Yeah, they don't show it, right? They don't have like an iOS view. So that's pretty cool. Let's kill that. Let's do our trusty friend, ifnse. Let's build it from here. This will take a little bit. It's pretty quick. So it must have had run some command line tools to and Android Studio to build some of that. Just launching the simulator. I think once we do that, we'll just wrap up. I think this is already accomplished, right? We only want a library there, right? You know, creates module. Effortlessly creates a shared module. I think that's the case. I think that's true, right? All right. So the simulator is running. We got our generated Swift classes. This is Swift UI. So we have the app delegate, which sets up this guy. Which sets up this content view. And this text calls greet, which calls the shared module over here. Awesome. Okay, so this is the test, right? If we go to the, my keyboard bindings get screwed up. So yeah, my keyboard bindings get screwed up every time I update Android Studio because I'm using, so the automatic update for Android Studio doesn't work since I'm using the OpenGDK, like there's a permissions issue. Yeah, I should just keep React Native on like a completely separate machine than touching native development. The other thing I really don't like is like I use multiple users on Mac, and Homebrew with multiple users is like, oh, it's just terrible. So go to shared. No. Common main, Kotlin. Go to greeting. And they should reverse, right? All right, so I changed it here. I assume this doesn't work, right? If we just go here and build it, like, does that automatically build what we had there and produces like a new library, a new framework. I assume it doesn't, but that's in the Gradle script, right? We saw that there. In the top level Gradle script. My key bindings. Pack for Xcode, yeah. Sync. So still building. Okay, what do we got? Yeah, I did it. So that's really cool. So yeah, the main thing is easy to make changes on the shared module and automatically bring them into Xcode. So the last test we'll do is we'll expose something new, right? So we'll go to greeting, right? Well, now we're going to expose a new function called hello. So we have hello there. In Android, this is pretty easy. We should be able to do that, right? Goes to hello. In Xcode, I assume it's not as easy. Yeah, because it's like, what is this? So if I click play, I assume it will build it. But that is annoying, right? Like you make the change over there. You want to update automatically, right? And so like it was like able to automatically sync between the IDEs. I don't know. IntelliJ has supposedly a good Xcode setup or Swift setup for, was it MacLine? I've never used it. So if you had the ability to just edit that in here, like I guess it'd bring into question, like Xcode just has like a bunch of nice features, right? Like you're used to it, especially for the UI stuff. Like you don't want to do that in Android Studio. So I could see why like they don't want to make that too easy, but this is acceptable experience, right? So overall, a lot of pluses. I'll stop it there. Next, we'll probably take a look at just like Hello World for keyboards for iOS. Just get that to work, and then we'll spend some time like actually thinking about what we want to do. We want to make an emoji keyboard. Like, what does that mean? You know, how do we build that out? And we'll think about like what is the common code that we'll have in the multi-platform project. We'll bring that into the iOS keyboard, and you know, just see how that works. How does it feel? Is it easy to use so far? It looked good, but yeah, the test will be when we actually like modify the heck out of the iOS application, right? And what's provided there. But I'll stop there for now, and yeah, I'll make another video hopefully this week. Oh, should stop the recording.